Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Inside Today's Boardrooms, presented by Diligent Institute, your source for the latest and greatest in corporate governance, all in 10 minutes. I'm Dottie Schindlinger, Executive Director of the Diligent Institute, and I'll be your host today. I'm joined by Jon Szabo, partner at Meridian Compensation Partners. Jon joins us from his home base in Dallas, Texas, where he consults with a diverse range of clients across industries. Jon, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Jon, as we look ahead to 2025, what are some of the biggest trends emerging for compensation committees? And I'm thinking specifically about the areas that you think will garner the most focus and attention in the coming year.
Absolutely. There's a handful of things I think committees are going to be focused on in the coming year. It's been a bit of a stable period. A couple of years ago, the SEC, care of the Dodd-Frank Act, gave us some surprises around pay versus performance and clawback policies. So there was a flurry of activity over the course of 2023 for that. And I think in 2025, it's going to be hopefully a little bit more stable. But a few things I think committees are going to be focusing on. One, I don't think the clawback topic is going to go away. Recent proxy data that came out this year showed quite an increase in prevalence of supplemental discretionary clawback policies that boards are implementing to allow for recoupment of compensation for certain misconduct activities and events. And so I think a lot of companies over the course of 2023, they focused on adopting a compliant policy with what their listing exchanges and the Dodd-Frank Act was requiring in the SEC. However, I think just given the increase in prevalence of these supplemental policies, we're going to see some committees probably turning their attention to try to keep pace with market. Like anything, the blue chips, the S&P 500 companies are kind of leading the charge, and that's where we saw the greatest prevalence. And some of the smaller companies, the more mid-cap, small-cap companies, tend not to want to be the market leaders for these types of policies and practices. But I think the market trend is going to be kind of compelling for these companies now that they've seen such an increase in prevalence of the supplemental discretionary clawbacks. Every year, goal setting and incentive plan is a hot topic, and especially now going into the end of this year, as companies are starting to think about what their 2025 incentives might look like, and there's still a lot of uncertainty. Obviously, we'll have the election behind us at that point, but other economic uncertainty presents some challenges when you're setting performance goals for a given year, whether it's a one-year bonus plan or a multi-year cycle. And I think just, again, paying close attention to threshold and maximum performance intervals around target and how you might set that in periods of uncertainty, but also around how they might address adjustments to incentive plan performance goals over the course of a period, whether looking back on the year and wanting to make adjustments to the formulas, to the financial metric goals themselves, to handle sort of one-off or unexpected events. But I think what's important is that committees also consider this as much as they can on the front end. And you can't obviously game plan for every potential unknown that might occur throughout the year. But it's important, I think, to have your laundry list of eligible adjustment areas, but also have a broader set of guiding principles around how a compensation committee might evaluate a potential adjustment that management might propose to an incentive plan outcome or a financial performance formula, and ensuring that they've thought through kind of the lenses that they might look at a potential adjustment, whether it's materiality, whether it's whether it is aligned with shareholder interests, if it's to the benefit or the detriment of management, and how it's maybe been applied in the past and precedent that might have been set. And so having a series of guiding principles, I think, is important going forward. And this is the time of year that committees should be thinking about that. And there's a couple other areas that I think that we're seeing continued focus. Compensation committee charters, for example. We saw over the past few years a bit of a trend where committees were adopting human capital management type topics and responsibilities within their charter, even going so far to change their name. I think we're going to see some committees kind of reevaluating that to see if what they've added is appropriate. Are they kind of walking the walk like they've adopted in their charter? Are they actually doing the activities, and to what extent are they effective? And having maybe adopted some human capital responsibilities over the past couple of years, have they learned anything different? Should things like succession plan and CEO performance evaluations and things along those lines that have found their way into compensation committee charters stay there, or do they fit better potentially with Nom and Gov or the broader board? So I think there's going to be some continued focus around just the committee charters and the contents themselves. We always see, and I think we're seeing a bit of an increasing interest from committees just in the below C-suite pay. Obviously, the comp committee is really focused on the executive officers, and they're responsible for setting executive officer pay. But just a general interest in how, for example, incentive design might cascade throughout an organization, and understanding are there kind of consistent threads between the executive incentives all the way down, through the rank and file. Understanding pay and gender or race equity as it applies deeper in the organization, understanding potential risk areas within the compensation programs deeper in the organization, and even just the rapid pace of change of compensation, and how the year-over-year change in compensation for the officer group might compare to the rank and file for a given company. A lot of committees just really don't want to see too much misalignment. We know that there's been misalignment. Officer pay has kind of grown more rapidly than rank and file pay, and I think committees are a little bit more interested now in just understanding how that dynamic is playing out within their given companies. And I think the final topic that would be interesting for committees to continue to take a look at is retirement provisions. Over the last year or so, we've seen the proxy advisors, for example, take a much more stern look at exit pay for voluntary, or what's perceived to be voluntary terminations, equity treatment for retirement. But at the same time, a lot of companies are also competing for late career talent, for example, that might offer a few years of strong value to a company, but not much more than just a few years. And so how do you structure their compensation or their equity to still attract that sort of talent, knowing that they're only going to be able to maybe give you 2, 3, 4 years? How do you do what's fair and make sure that they're compensated for what they can give? So I think those are the few topics where we're going to see committees spending some time this coming year. And hopefully that's probably an area that, these are areas that I think committees will find more valuable, because they are a little bit more strategic in some sense, as opposed to just kind of the compliance that they've been forced to try to keep up with over the past few years.
More strategic, but a long list.
It is a long list. Yeah.
What do you think are going to be the biggest challenges for compensation committees when they, work to oversee this long list of things? Is it that it's a lot on their plate? What are the biggest challenges that they're going to face?
I think partly it's going to be, to your point, how do you kind of bite off all of this over the course of the year, and in which committee meetings and on which agendas some of these topics fit. A lot of this is going to fall on management, frankly, because there's going to be a need for management to be providing data to the compensation committees and bringing them up to speed on things like the non-executive compensation arrangements and dynamics deeper in the organization, some of the goal setting and potential adjustments and things along those lines, how clawbacks might be perceived internally and what that might do culturally. So I do think that, as anything, committees are going to have to prioritize and figure out where are their more important areas of focus, and as it relates to their particular company and their own workforce and the situations that a company finds itself in, and on which committee agendas some of these topics might fit best, and what can be potentially deferred, and what's more of a burning issue.
Do you have some recommendations about the best way committees can be prepared to tackle these challenges effectively? I mean, there are other things other than just being in close contact with management?
Yeah, I think having a strong work plan is really important for any committee, and understanding what their annual calendar looks like, what are the recurring agenda items, and making sure that that's mapped out at the start of the year, or even now in the fourth quarter going into first quarter meetings, get that all nailed down ahead of time, so that the committee understands meeting by meeting what are the recurring agenda items. And not only that, what are some of these topics? Maybe there's others that we didn't just talk about that they just haven't thought about in a while, and where might they fit? And if you're kind of just focused meeting to meeting in the moment, you're going to lose track of the bigger picture. So if you've got a ability to establish a stronger work plan calendar at the outset that maps out each of the 5, 6 meetings that a committee might have, and what those agendas are going to look like, and embed that in the materials, and keep that in the diligent boardroom resources, so that the committee can see what's coming up meeting to meeting in the future. And if there are topics that they think are top of mind and are more important that they tackle, they know, and they can look ahead to see, all right, we want to address X, Y, and Z in the July or August meeting cycle, when we know it might be a little bit lighter. and gives everybody a bit of a heads up to do the legwork that's needed to be able to have a fruitful discussion with the committee when that meeting does come around.
Well, Jon, this has been a really helpful list, a to-do list, let's say, for the Compensation Committee for the upcoming year. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you, and happy to do it, and look forward to speaking with you again.
We'll see you next time on Inside Today's Boardrooms. Thank you so much for watching.